Welcome, Saners, back here for another week of the teams where we sit down, dissect, and discuss our lineup for this weekend's game. Week on week, it's getting a little bit harder and harder, but we're back here. We're going to discuss the lineup for this week, go through some questions, and obviously get your guys' inputs as well from home. I'll introduce the guys first. So we've got Evan, Ollie, and Pete back this weekend. For this week's edition. Just before we start, again, make sure you guys have your pizzas at home. Thanks to Southside Pizza, local Moorabbin sponsor for Saints TV. We love their support. So even for this Saturday, as we are playing away from home over in the West, no better chance to invest in the locals and grab a big, large pizza and use it a bit of as a therapy session for this weekend's game. So, boys, I don't want to talk about too much of what we think and all that sort of stuff. I'm sure every Saints fan was disappointed with the weekend's matchup. Going ahead, we're halfway through the season. What do we look forward to for the next sort of 11, 12 weeks as we sort of stumble and roll our way to the end of the finish line?
Who wants to go first for this question? I probably sort of launched a bit last week. It was my first time on the show, kind of explaining my position on where I think we're at and what's actually going on. It's kind of a rebuild on the run. I don't understand Brad Crouch not getting a game. I'm sure we'll get into it. The only thing I can think of, I said last week that I thought Hunter Clark's papers were probably stamped and that maybe he wasn't going to be trusted with a midfield role in this team anymore. And the only thing I can think of is that this is Ross now saying, mate, it's West Coast. Your VFL form's all right. You're fit. This is your chance to kind of take on that Brad Crouch role and back up Steele and Ross and Windy. Otherwise, see you later.
Well, Ross actually said in his press conference today that I think he wanted to give Crouch another week and bring him in for Gold Coast or Brisbane. So I'm not sure if it's to do with form or to do with his recovery, maybe.
Yeah, I can only hope it's injury for him there because I think Hunter Clark deserves another go in the middle there. But when your other team member is Seb Ross, looking at his stats, no tackles the entire game. And in a game when, you're losing that first hit out with Max Gawn just dominating, the very least you can expect is for him to land a tackle or two. So if he's not going to show that team defense, you'd imagine Crouch is there unless he's injured still.
See, for me, I think Ross and Crouch can't play in the same team because they're too similar. Steele's obviously the leader of that pack in terms of being an inside sort of clearance tackle / sort of mid. Three of them, and then you've got, the likes of Windhager and that, who's probably more of that trying to be explosive type. It just doesn't work. I think Seb Ross was lining up on the wing at stages on Sunday against these, and I'm like, he's not your wingman. You don't want him ever to be on the wing. It's not a case of injuries. Like we've probably got the best injury list at the moment compared to anyone else in the league. So there's no excuse for sort of not having availability. But it just sort of shows a little bit of a sign of where we are at the moment and the lack of cohesion. I think chemistry is a big one at the moment where, like, every time something happens on the field, everyone just drops their head. There's no sort of constructive support. What are your thoughts on that, Ollie?
I think what people forget is that we've lost so many games by under 10 points and we could so easily be in such a better position, and we're not in form. Like, we're probably the lowest our form is going to get this year, or at least that's what we hope. But yeah, I don't know. Like, we could be in a better position, and you can see when they're playing that there's just the handballs when we're trying to move it quickly, just going behind players, and it's just not working. Whatever the game plan is, it's just not working right now, whether it's the teams we've played or the guys we've brought in. Something's just not clicking like it needs to.
Yeah, I think the danger there is that we did lose all those games at the start of the season by under 10 points. and it feels like we haven't gone back to training, learnt our 2-minute drills, learnt that pressure game situation. It feels like it's gone the other way, and suddenly we're losing by the wider margin, whether that's just a tired defense or it just feels like we haven't focused on that right aspect that we were getting right.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. Let's have a look at the team for this week. We made some changes, and we'll dissect of what we think's good, what we think's bad, in relation to those changes for this week. But we've got Clark in. So I'm just loading that up now. Yeah, perfect. There we go. Clark in, Membry in, and Dan Butler back in. Let's start from the top. Hunter Clark coming back in. Pete, you sort of touched on it a little bit as well. But I mean, personally, I think he adds a little bit more class to that midfield. We know what he can do. When he's fit and firing, he's got that composure. Sort of game starts to be a little bit slower for him once he gets a little bit more confident in the middle of the ground. But he just adds a little bit of a dimension to that midfield group as well for this weekend's game.
Yeah, I mean, my take on Hunter Clark is purely looking at him from a midfielder's aspect. I still remember, and I'm sure we both do, those back-to-back games in the COVID season when we played Port Adelaide and Adelaide back-to-back. And like he was 18, 19 at the time, or he might have just turned 19, I think. And we were talking about him like he was Scott Pendlebury, right? Like there were games where he was in the back pocket and no one could touch him. He'd get the ball and he was saving us time and time again. And we thought, this is it. Like we finally nailed one of these top draft picks, and away we go. And I think Rats tried to turn him into a midfielder, and I think Ross is sort of saying, hey mate, you've got to be a midfielder. And my suspicion is that his best role and where we could use him best is in the back line. But as I mentioned last week, we've got so many of those types. You've got Naz, you've got Sink. Hill plays wing, but then pushes back to take kick-outs. We brought in Bonner, and I don't want to get started on Bonner retaining his spot in the team. But we have all these halfback types, and so Clark is kind of make or break as a midfielder. He tried to get to North Melbourne, and I think he would have ended up playing kind of the role that they put McKercher in this year that they recruited Zach Fisher for. He probably would have played as that like defensive wing halfback. And I just don't think we have a spot for him here. I hope that he makes it. I think he's down the depth chart, but this is, I mean, this is his opportunity, right? It's West Coast. I know they've got a decent midfield, but it's West Coast, man. Like, if you are ever going to perform, this is your chance to do it. Like, please do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Evan, what's your thoughts on Hunter Clark? Best position, but also is he still within our best 22, not only for the next sort of half of the season, but, going forward as well?
As you say, if he can perform, we need him. We need him badly in the midfield there to just have a bit of extra spark. Obviously, he did have 9 clearances in the VFL, which was something we needed there to actually be able to get the ball out. My only concern is he had those 9 clearances, but still at only 50% disposal efficiency. And we really don't need another guy getting his hands on the ball and spraying it and not actually getting any forward connection. That doesn't help us. We need someone running through there that's actually going to be able to lower the eyes and hit targets there. So hopefully get into that AFL pace. He can catch up quickly. But I think it's so much a confidence thing with him post-injuries and post a couple of years where he hasn't reached those heights that we thought he'd hit.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And again, those that are watching at home, share your thoughts on the ins this week. As I mentioned, Hunter Clark, we just touched on Tim Membry and Butler. Ollie, over to you now. We've sort of criticised Max King a lot, and I've got a fair bit to say about that. But this week, Tim Membry comes back, kicks 6 in for Sandy on the weekend. I think he had about sort of 10, 12 marks as well. Had a really good performance. And Dan Butler comes back in to sort of speed up that forward line. Are you happy with how that looks compared to what we've had previous weeks?
I think, to be honest, Membry had to come back in after playing that well at VFL, after being managed. That showed that he's still AFL quality and he's still such an important part of our team as a player and a leader. I'm not sure about Butler. He kind of hasn't really ever been able to live up to his form again from 2020.
Yeah.
I think it was worth getting in a bit more like a senior group, like Hunter Clark. I'm not too sure how many games he's played, but he's definitely played around the 100 mark. And it's the cohesion that we were talking about earlier. That's what we need more of, and I think bringing in the senior guys will be able to help with that, and maybe bring some of the younger guys along with them.
Absolutely. I think, and I want to say this for all the people, because there's a lot of haters out there for Max King. Max King is not the issue. If you think Max King is the issue, then you're not looking at it from a logical and realistic point of view, because he was by far our most damaging forward last week. I think we kicked like maybe 8 or 9 goals in normal time. I know we kicked a few junk time goals of late, but he was the one that was, he took a few clunks, kicked through the big sticks. You take him out of that side, even if you put Charlie Curnow in that team at the moment, in that forward line, he's still going to have the same amount of impact as Max King. So people that do call for him to be traded, be careful what you wish for, because the moment you trade him, you'll see him go dominate, because he'll be in a much more fluent and smoother transition team that he'll be able to allow to, damage the scoreboard. And the likelihood of him doing that against us is, if we did trade him, is 99.98%. If I'm completely honest.
That's the thing. Like, Max King's form was mirroring the team's form. Like, It wasn't just him playing badly and the rest of the team were up. He was down because the rest of the team was down. It wasn't too different.
Yeah, 100%. And that's how forward craft works. In terms of forward line's only as good as the delivery coming in. Yeah, you can create a few turnovers, and I think that's probably why they brought Butler back this week, just to create a bit more defensive pressure with him and Higo, Henry, Darcy Wilson. But ideally, from a midfield perspective, it's on them to deliver it to the forwards and allow them to have the first grab at it. So I think there was a few times against Melbourne where they had a centre clearance and they kicked it in, and Bailey Fritz was one out because he just created enough space, and it was a one-on-one contest. When was the last time we were able to do that as a centre clearance and getting it first into the forward 50? Maybe once a game, if that. And if it is, it's a high sky ball and it's created for a pack, and it's not great viewing. Pete, you touched on it a little bit, and I know you said you didn't want to touch on it, but I'm going to get you to touch on it anyway, because I know a few people from home, and a few of us will probably have the same opinion. Riley Bonner holds his spot for another week. Is he the favourite? Is he the teacher's pet?
I tell you what I was thinking about just in the discussion with Butler there is, look, I'm of the belief that Ross is a better coach. He's learned more. We hear about how much he's delegating to the assistants in terms of tactics, in terms of game day, in terms of, teaching everything. But I can't help but think back to like 08, 09, 2010, when we had these kids named David Armitage and Jack Stephen running around in the VFL. And it was the really coachable guys in, McQualter and Rob Eddy. Look, Jimmy Gwilt was a great, C-grade player for us for a while, but you can't help but wonder, well, what if we got someone else in, who was a young kid who was raw, that could develop quicker. And, over the off-season, when Port Adelaide cut Bonner, I was one of the people that was just like, oh my gosh, someone's going to get a bargain here. Because he finds the ball, he's a good mark, he reads the play pretty well. He's got a long boot on him, but he's the most vanilla halfback flanker I think you could ever see in the competition. And he's one of those guys that, like, I just don't see how he makes our team better now, and I don't see how he makes our team better in 3 years' time. And I would much rather, especially given where the season's at right now, I would much rather give that spot. I'd rather give that spot to Hunter Clark and say, mate, for the next 10 games, you're playing halfback flank, and bring in Ollie Houghton to play midfield or forward, or bring Hasty back in to lay some tackles. Or, I don't want to hype him up too much, but the one guy that we all keep talking about for that spot in Ari Schoenmaker, and we were all absolutely rapt that we got him in the draft. couldn't believe that he fell that far based on whatever it was, personality issue. But give him the last 10 or 12 games of the season and just see what happens, because surely that's going to be better for us. Maybe not over those 12 games, but in 50 games time, we're going to be way better off doing that than giving Riley another 10 or 20 games over the next 18 months. And good on him for forging a career, man, but he's a depth player at best, and he should not be in this team anymore. I'm sorry.
No, I like it. I think I had the same opinion of you of him. Sorry, at the start of the year when we picked him up, thinking, look, he'll provide some depth. Webster or Stocker goes down, he can come in, he can push Naz into the middle a little bit. We haven't seen that enough, I don't think. His speed and athleticism through the middle of the ground. Sinclair's been, he had a good game last week without, doing too much damage. But for overall, his season's been a little bit down as well. So I think you make a fair point. Do you think, with Ari, you mentioned him, and I want to touch on him a little bit, as well as Josh Battle. Do you think those two are too similar to have in the same team? And this is to Ollie and Evan as well.
No. If we can have Bonner in the team, you can have Sean Maker in the team. That's as simple as that. They can. There's no reason they can't make that swap.
Yeah, probably depends on the.
Sorry, no, you go.
No. Probably depends on the team we're going up against, just as far as height-wise. But I do agree that you could comfortably have both those in there. I find it strange with Bonner, and this always confuses me. If you had to guess what percentage disposal efficiency he had last week, what do you reckon it would be around?
It was around the 80%.
65?
Yeah, so it feels like 65, but it's 80% exactly there. And I think despite what the numbers say, just watching it, despite, kicking it straight to the other team in the forward 50, I think that the type of exit just feels less efficient for the team as a whole. It's not as quick. It's long bombs. Even if he's managing to pull it off, I think it just doesn't work with the team in the same way that, as you say, a show maker might be able to do.
The thing with Bonner is, and I said this last week, he's the perfect fantasy footy player, right? Like AFL fantasy, ultimate footy, dream team, whatever pick your poison. But he's one of those guys that everybody looks at and goes, oh yeah, he's not bad. He keeps racking up like 85, 90, 100 points every week because he takes heaps of marks and he has lots of long kicks.
But he doesn't do any damage with it.
Yeah, I had a mate during the week be like, yeah, same deal, right? It's like, he didn't have that many turnovers. It's like, but it's the 3 or 4 kicks a game that are just absolutely killing us. And then the kicks that he is making aren't driving us anywhere, right? Like anybody can pull off a 20-meter kick from back pocket to back pocket. That's not what we need out of the team, right? If you can kick it 65 meters, we need you to run 10. Get around the man on the mark, or have someone lay a block for you, get a 1-2 handball, whatever it is, and then
break those lines.
Break the line and be driving it from the middle of the ground inside 50. That's what you should be using the kick for, not being the first option on a kick in and then hoofing it 60 meters to the wing for a bowler. Like it's useless.
And those 3 or 4 kicks you were talking about are the ones that we actually need him to pick off. You'd prefer him to mess up one down the wing and pick off that one through the middle that sends us inside 50 to kick a goal. And, maybe a couple down the wing, maybe one goes out in the full, one gets marked or something, but it's on the wing, it's fine. Whereas when he picks off the one into the middle, it's the dangerous kick that we need to try, but it just rolls along the ground or something, completely scrubs it. And it's just not exactly what we need from him.
Yeah. And that's where
in fairness to that as well. Oh, sorry, just to cut you off, Pete. Sorry. In fairness that every other player is doing that as well. That kick that we need to. It happened first 2 minutes into the game on the weekend. Josh Battle I think he had Steele or Marshall clear as day in the middle of the MCG, and he kicked it 2 meters before it scrubbed to him, and then I think Melbourne went and scored a goal from it. So it's not on Bonner, it's on everyone at the moment.
Yeah, but the only thing is we expect it from Bonner. We don't necessarily expect Josh Battle to try that kick. We want Bonner and we want Naz and Bradley Hill as well to kind of pick off those kicks. And so it's kind of a little bit, I feel like it's a little more forgivable when it's someone who doesn't normally try that, but when it's someone who you got in the club to do that, and he's not quite doing it to the level you expect. It's just not as good.
The last thing I'll throw up on that as well is with someone like Bonner or Sinclair, like these sort of older established players who might try and pull that kick off, you can recall times when they actually did it. And I know Bonner hasn't been at the club long enough for us to probably have that goodwill towards him or to have that, built up. And I didn't, I can't say that I watched a heap of him when he was at Port, but he doesn't have those credits in the bank with us. So when he doesn't hit that kick, you can't think back and say, oh, well, that's okay because he hit that twice last week. So that's fine. That was just a bad one. It's 9 out of 10 of them are bad. And so you're sitting there saying, please don't pull that kick off. Please don't try that. And then we're left with the long bomb down the wing. It's like I said, I'd rather have Hunter Clark trying to pull that off because in 2 years' time, Hunter Clark could be a much better player than he is now. I'd rather have Ari in the team trying to pull that kick off because if he makes a mistake, cool, learn from it because in 2 years' time, he's going to be a much better player than he is now. I don't see Bonner being any better than he is right now. And to me, that's the frustrating part. It's like you've done it again, Riley. You've had another week where you've shifted around in the back line. You've tried to pull off some kicks, you haven't done it. You've bombed it down the line and killed all their momentum and we've gone nowhere. You don't provide any running carry. I'm sorry, mate. Good on you for making it to the level, but you're a C-grade depth player at best, and we need to put him back in the VFL and try something different. That's my frustration.
I think that touches on why the ins and outs here are a little bit confusing or disappointing, in that I look at that and I really can't tell if we're trying to build, if we've reached the point of the season where we've decided to build players, or if we're still trying to float or the like. Bringing in, Showmaker, bringing in Garcia again, something along those lines would really tell you that, okay, we've gone into get the kids a few more games mode. But bringing in a mix of Clark and Butler, I'm still not sure if where we're trying to sell ourselves at.
I mean, imagine how excited we'd be if Ollie Houghton came in instead of Butler. Not to discredit Butler. Like I said, I'm sure he's a super coachable player, and Ross would love him because he's going to lay plenty of tackles, scored 50, right? It's be Andrew McCullough all over again, kind of. But what did Houghton kick in the VFL at 4 or 5 goals?
Like,
5. Didn't he have a monster game last week? It's like, imagine how excited we would be if he was coming in this week. Like, oh, this kid's got his tail up and about. Let's see what he can do. Like, start him on the ground. Please don't. Please stop making kids the sub. I hate when they do that. But, like, put him on the ground and see what happens. And if he's gassed at half time, then you pull the sub and do what you got to do. But we'd all much rather see that. And it's like, all right, Dan's going to come in and have his 10 or 12 touches and lay half a dozen tackles and maybe kick a goal. It's like, okay, well,
even Garcia, like, he might not be as good of a goal kicker as Butler, but he's got that tackle pressure. We've seen it. We know he's done it in the VFL. And if that's what Butler's been brought in for, because he hasn't been kicking goals at AFL level, Hugo Garcia could have done that just as well, if not better, and also develops him a little bit more for the future. Whereas I don't think Butler's going to be around in 4 or 5 years when we're hopefully pushing for a premiership.
Well, looking at
how many
list,
times have we been saying that, Ollie?
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. Yeah.
Looking at that list, I'd imagine Butler is sub. I can't see any of the others marked there at least. And I'm still, I'd hope it's not Clark. And I'm really torn at the moment. I think you mentioned you don't like seeing the kids as the sub there. And I'd definitely agree with that because I think we've had most cases this year where a new player's come in and I think it puts them in the wrong frame of mind for the game, or it's in at the deep end and they don't have the solid head on their shoulders. I really wouldn't have minded seeing Crouch as the sub sort of thing, a senior player who can be inserted, take out one of the younger kids, be ready, even if he is lingering with a bit of an injury, so he can come in and actually be ready for AFL level rather than, just throwing in another quick player and hoping for the best.
Yeah, I mean, I've always said it from the start, no kid should be the sub. Maybe sub them out, but don't, the best exposure is to be there right from the start. So definitely would agree with that. Just want to go to a few comments from home. Again, always appreciate you guys commenting each week. From Chris, Collard has been crap. hasn't been great, is a better way to put that, Chris. But on the home deck, could have performed well. What do you think? Personally, I think he played 1 week too many last week. I don't think he's just up to that AFL standard just yet. He's been kicking some goals in the twos, but his defensive pressure, as I've said all year, has been really disappointing. And then it was evident in the last couple of weeks in the AFL level that he's just so far from it at the moment. He's still a young kid. It's not to say that he's never going to make it. But I still think with the run home that we've got, and the club knows this, we've got a very friendly run home. I know we do play a few tough teams, but the majority of them are at Marvel. We only have one interstate trip. It's to Adelaide against the Crows, who are a little bit of flat track bullies. But the possibility, don't get me wrong, the likelihood is unlikely, but the possibility to actually start to turn things around, as Ollie said at the start, we've only lost, what was it? I think we're 1-5 by under 10 points. So stat wise and win loss, it could easily be a whole lot different without playing our best football. So look, I'm trying to be, positive and really on the outlook of what can be for the season ahead. But I think it's a possibility that, we can turn it around. But I sort of wanted to throw you guys each. Collard playing at home, should they have done it? Should they not have done it? But then also looking forward to the end of the season, is it the club thinking, look, we're probably good for that 10, 11, 12 spot. Let's flunk out a little bit, not to suggest tanking, but to expose a little bit more of a change in and what we can do going forward, be a little bit lower and then reload and, attack next year.
Yeah, on Collard, I think so. I was at the game last week and I was sitting basically behind the goals at the St Kilda end. And in the second quarter, there was a couple of times where Collard was in a really, really good spot in the pocket and he made a really great lead and he got burned. And he was he kind of turned to the crowd and was so frustrated with himself or at not getting given the ball. And I think although he hasn't been great and probably needs to develop a little bit more, you could just see how much that ate into him and into his confidence. And I don't think that was great for him. Maybe you're right. Like he should have had been sent back to the VFL instead of playing against Melbourne. But I think for a young guy, seeing how disappointed he was in either himself or his teammates for, getting himself into a good spot, I'm really hoping that he's all right. Like his confidence is all right because he didn't look happy at all.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's a
felt
reflection. Oh, sorry, go Evan. You're right.
Definitely felt like he's in the right spot, but it's a mix of our midfield connection and also just not being in the right headspace yet, not being prepared for it. It is still yet to get more than 5 disposals sort of deal. And I felt like it was setting him up to fail a little bit for that game there. I think from the start, I reckon most people would expected him to be subbed out at some stage throughout the game, which is just going to wreck you. And also, if we got an injury, 30 seconds into the match and you've got sort of a player out there that you're planning to sub, it doesn't feel like the best way forward planning for sort of failure.
Yeah, and for me personally, but without knowing all the machinations behind the scenes, I would have loved for him to get the opportunity to play in front of his family. Maybe that's, one of those intangible things that could kickstart him and really get him going. I mean, imagine, first quarter we get an early break as a pack, it spills, he picks it up, jags a goal in front of, everyone back home. Like that's one of those little moments that could potentially turn it. The only other thing I can think of, and like I said last week, I hate that we yo-yo people in and out of the team. It is what it is, but he was a West Coast NGA player, was he not?
I don't think he was, but I could be wrong.
I'll double check because I think everyone was a little bit shocked when we took him. I'm just quickly double checking. West Coast NGA. Yeah, so he was one of West Coast NGA players, and we took him right before the bidding cut off. so that West Coast weren't able to match the bid. I wonder if, because there was some talk early that when we took him that he was like super homesick when he first got to the club, and there was a bit of talk amongst people that maybe he was going to be out kind of quick, and we were going to have to back in the club culture to keep him. I wonder if maybe this isn't, and I'm throwing my tinfoil hat on here, I wonder if maybe this isn't the club wanting to keep him away from a few mates that he might have at the Eagles, or maybe not have him back around the coaches and the group and the people that he knows who might get in his ear and be like, hey, don't worry, mate, you've only got to last 6 more months and then we'll come get you. That's complete tinfoil hat stuff, I know, but it may be.
Yeah, I think in today's sort of environments with footballs and those sort of things, even if he wasn't to go, like all it does is he'd have their phone numbers and just make a call anyway. I don't think that impacts maybe 10 years ago when the ability to get in contact with particular players and coaches from other teams and that sort of stuff would be a little bit harder. Getting away and seeing them in person would be easier. I think now, like, the players grab their phones an hour and a half, 2 hours after the game, and they're on it straight away. So all it takes is one little iMessage or little Instagram message from another player to say, hey, give us a call and let's have a chat, for that conversation to take place. And he can do that from home, doesn't have to do that over in Optus Stadium. So I see where you're going with it and the tinfoil thing, but I just don't think he's up to it at the moment, and that's not a bad thing. He's still a first-year player. He's still got plenty of time left in him to really develop those skills. Just want to go to a comment here from Justin. Justin, you did ask about Jack Hayes, what's happened to him. He's out for the next 6 weeks with a knee injury. I don't want to talk about that because I think that might be the end of that in regards to Jack Hayes, but hopefully not. But another comment here from Justin, just looking at the team on paper, it's better than last year. It's just the game plan. Somewhat agree, somewhat disagree, but I want to focus on the first half of that. The team on paper compared to what we can see with the Eagles are putting up for this weekend, are we actually confident in getting the 4 points?
I think all it takes for me to be confident is for us to get a hold of Barras and McGovern. I'm scared of seeing them both out there on the park this week. So that's the one thing that makes me really glad that Membry's on the list as far as that goes, to try and cut that down a little bit. If we can start getting the ball down and try and punish them there, we might have a bit more of a chance, just because I reckon we can get through some of those small defenders. That to me is the real key thing, because if we let Barras and McGovern intercept Marcus all afternoon, that's what makes me really scared.
Ollie, what about you? You comfortable with our team this week?
I honestly completely agree with Evan. Like, I've got McGovern in my super coach team, so I'd like to see him have a good game, but we win. But that's what we do every week, is somehow the intercept defenders of the team we're playing seem to have, not necessarily career best, but season best games. So I think we need to change our ball movement, which we can do. We've seen it before. And Skunk being in is perfect for that, because King and Hammer can be the two big targets. And then Tim just kind of, we saw it, I think it might have been the Collingwood game. He just makes a short lead through, like, to the side of a pack, so they're not expecting it to go there. And then I think specific one I'm thinking of, Liam Henry just pulled a kick to him in the pocket. That's the sort of lead that we need more. And I think that's the best way to stop those two guys, Barras and McGovern, from having a big impact.
Just on that, just before I go to you, Pete, I think the best thing was to put Memory in the twos and let him have a game where he kicks 6 goals and takes a few clunks. It was never a case of doubting his ability. It was just his form, like the amount of easy marks that he was dropping. He was down on confidence. Yep. Now he's done what he had to do. Go back and kick a bag. His confidence should be absolutely spiraling back up, or jumping back up. And he should be coming out on Saturday with a real, I'm the best forward in this lineup. Give me McGovern, I'll still outmark him, and having that sort of confidence to go forward. Pete, what about you? What's your thoughts on this team sheet?
So there's 2 things that concern me, or two. One's a question, one's a concern. And one of the boys mentioned it in the chat. I apologize, I didn't write down whose name it was. but we don't have a clear second ruckman. And I assume Caminiti might do a little bit, King might do a little bit. I know Membry sometimes had kind of gone in there. But the Eagles do that really well, and they have a decent midfield. And the question, or something that I hope happens, is I hope that we set Windy a job on Harley Reid. And I know that sounds crazy because he's 10 games into his career, but we've all seen the highlights, we've all seen what happens. And the thing that scares me about this game is we are vulnerable at the moment, and it's one of those things that a kid like Harley is going to look at us and go, I can get you guys. And if he gets up and about early, he is a massive barometer for them. He gets the crowd into it. They all get energized when he plays well. And I just hope that Windy's done jobs on players before. We all remember, he took out Lachie Neale last year. I'd love him to just go and take Reid out of the game and just make this kid a non-factor. That scares the shit out of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I think he's definitely got that ability to, as you said, be the barometer, be the crowd lifter, but also be damaging. Something that our midfield's probably lacking a little bit is that X factor ability. I'd also like to see throw Windy towards Reid. Obviously, the tagging job these days in football has probably gone out the window, but just from a clearance perspective, Windy to Reid, but then Jack Steele to go to like a Yo or a Tim Kelly as well, who is still pretty decent footballers. They haven't lost too much of their ability. And I agree with you, Ollie, the concern for, McGovern, Barris, even Tom Cole, Liam Duggan, who are decent intercept marks as well. We keep it high and long, and really shallow entries, as a viewer said earlier as well, then they're just going to have a field day and rack up as, records and upon records regarding that one. Question here from Wooden, and then I'll jump to you, Evan. Do we think sending Wilson to Reid could be worth trying for a bit? Probably not. I like Wilson's run on the outside. I think he's 100%. Too valuable on that outside to be in the middle. I think end goal will be him in the guts, but that's probably like 2-3 years away for Wilson. But Evan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we've got enough shutdown roles with Windy and Steele both in the team there to go across there. And as you say, that forward connection from someone like Wilson and Liam Henry, we still desperately need that to get through the packs, to get those nicer inside 50s. So definitely prefer Windy going to someone like Reid, but even Yo worries me a little bit. That midfield when they're at home this year has looked like a completely renewed team. So I'm glad we've got some flexibility in that way at least. I wouldn't mind seeing this, and I know we mentioned it sporadically, but King getting a bit further down the ground. I think we saw it a little bit sort of in the middle against Stephen May, getting him outside of the defensive 50. Doing a similar role on McGovern or Barras, if they'd follow him out, might give us a bit more of a chance there. Looking back, he does tend to have more score involvements when he does play that down-the-ground role, and might get him in it a bit more.
Yeah, I think he did a really good job on May. As I said from the start, Max King's definitely not the issue. I think he definitely had a game plan to bring him up forward and then use his speed and athleticism on the way back and get him out of the back, and it worked. I thought he was, extremely dangerous. Stephen May, whilst on the wings, had a bit of an impact, but on a one-on-one factor, I thought King held his own really, really well. Just before I jump to our under the microscope, Chris has mentioned here, I want to talk about Josh Battle as well. But can we talk about Warner not signing extension? We should go after him with a big contract. What do you think? Personal thoughts, I don't think he would come to us. I think it's either Sydney or back home to WA. There's been a bit of talk with the Eagles chasing him a little bit, but I think ideally he'll probably re-sign with the Swans. But is that a player that we can possibly look at? We're looking at LDU for next year's free agency class. Is he another one?
I mean,
I don't think so.
You'd love to say yes, but the issue that we have, and it's something that I've talked about mates before, is if he's going to come to Victoria, like, what's our selling point other than a big pile of cash? Like, unless we're a clear contender, unless we're sitting, firmly entrenched in the top six with, being able to sell that we're a premiership hope, Like, why would he, if it's money that he's after, why would he come to us over, Richmond or Hawthorn if he's happy to go to a bottom team and they're playing in front of 60, 70,000 people at the G? Or, if we're going to offer him $1.5 million, but Essendon can offer him $1 million to go play Anzac Day and King's birthday and these sorts of things. Like, that's what makes it hard for us. And I think it's something, it's not for this chat, but I think it's something the club needs to get better at, is finding, marquee games, finding ways that we can get on prime time, finding things that we can sell outside of we're a good team, come play for us. Because otherwise we have to pay that premium player tax. We have to pay more than players are worth to get them to come to us.
100%. Ollie, you agree?
Yeah, I think that we've got our eyes more on McCluggage or LDU. McCluggage is I heard he got a 7-year offer from Brisbane. He hasn't taken it because we would have heard about that. But that's sort of a watch at the moment. But LDU would be above Warner on the list anyway, and maybe even Andy Brayshaw. So yeah, I don't think Warner's the right player to go for.
I'd agree with that. LDU and Brayshaw are the two that, even if we can land one of them, I think that's a mark for 5-6 years of midfield dominance. They're both entering their prime sort of years, footballing age-wise. I think that's perfect. Evan, what about Josh Battle? Unrestricted free agent, so we don't have the ability to match. There's a few clubs chasing him. Melbourne's interested. Hawthorn's interested. Obviously, we are as well. Do you lock him down, or do you say, look, if you're going to accept a big offer, go elsewhere. Let's bring Ari in and get another draft pick.
Yeah, I think it was only about 2 weeks ago that I mentioned that there's no way he's leaving. He's a local boy. We got a solid backline there. It's a solid unit. He'll be fine. And then watching the Melbourne game for the first time, I went, "Oh, he's going to leave, isn't he?" And it was just a moment, but I got because we don't have that, as you mentioned, sort of optimism for the immediate future that we did have at the end of last year, sort of thing. You could clearly pitch to him, hey, this is the direction we're going. You're going to be really key to the direction we're going as that backline. Now, do we have that necessarily? And it forces us to splurge that money, and it's just the wrong way to keep players, because immediately they lose that connection necessarily that's ingrained just by being there as sort of club culture. So I'd love to keep him there, but not quite as certain as I was 2 weeks ago.
Is that the same with you, Pete? I mean, my whispers at the start of the year was it was going to be an early decision done, much like Mateus. And the longer it gets drawn out, it's puts a little bit of question marks in their head to say,
100%.
hang on, maybe this won't actually happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about him in terms of personality, in terms of his role. I know that when Rats was there was a lot of frustration. There was talk that he had a lot of frustration about his role in the team, about being sort of swung around, and he just wanted a spot, didn't care if it was forward, back, whatever it was. In terms of keeping him, in terms of paying him, I mean, there's talk that he's getting offered $1 million a year to leave. Is he $1 million player? Probably not right now. Is he $1 million player in the next CBA that's coming? Because it's whatever it is, like a 20 or 30% increase. I mean, if the average wage in the AFL is going to be $400,000 a year, then is he twice as good as the average player? Yeah, probably.
Only for a team without a backline.
So that's my question and my concern, right? Is if he leaves, and let's say we're happy to give him, 800, and someone else is going to pay him $1 million. So now we've got an $800,000 surplus in our salary cap. What are we doing with it? I mean, is that why we made a play for Wiedering? Is because we know Battle's leaving? Is that why we were happy to pay him, 1.5? Because we know we've got 800K from Battle going, that we're happy to throw that way? Do we make a play elsewhere? Is that part of why we're going to be able to buy LDU? Or, I think Brayshaw's a great shout because he's got a connection with Ross, and he's talked publicly about how much he loves Ross. Like, that's something we can maybe work towards, come come back home, play for Ross again. He probably walks in the door as captain of the club at the end of next year. But we only do that because we know Battle's leaving. That's my concern is if we let him walk out the door, I think that's a public signal. And look, we don't have a choice because he's an unrestricted free agent, I'm pretty sure. But if he walks out the door, I think that's then a pretty clear signal that this is now this is an official rebuild, right? It's on. It's no more picking senior players. It's if Schoenmaker's going to come in and play that intercepting role, cool. Then Houghton needs to get in. Garcia needs to get in. Collard needs to just play 15 games in a row, regardless of whether he touches the ball. And we just go full ball for it, and we do the Hawthorn Richmond thing, and we're sitting at the bottom of the ladder for 3 years. I think that's the concern, is that we don't have an immediate, obvious, ready to go replacement, and I don't know what we do with that money that makes us a better team than we are now.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think we can sit here all day and talk about, who can come in, who can leave, who can, benefit us going forward. We might sort of save that talk a little bit for the bye week, which is not too far away. Before we wrap up, we always like to do this, or I always like to do this, and people from home usually contribute quite a bit. Under the microscope, look, there's probably a few players that will pop up on a week-to-week basis here at the moment because that's just the form we're in. Ollie, I'm going to jump to you first. Who's under the microscope for you this week against the Eagles over in Perth?
I'm not going with a player. I'm going to talk about our ball movement. I think our ball movement is under the microscope. So what I've noticed from the last 2 weeks, being at both games, one against Freo, I was up on level 3, and then last week, as I mentioned, I was level 1, like right at the very front. What I've noticed is coming out of the back line, we've got guys like Naz and Bonner getting in the back pocket. Now, what I think is that they need to be the next kick and then get it out of 50. We can't have them being deep and trying to get rid of the ball that way, because then no one's moving. So then they're just having to bomb it or try and pick off some ridiculous kick, which is another thing that we're like getting into Bonner about. It's not helping us. And then we flip that and we try to move the ball quicker. But then, like I mentioned earlier, it looks messy and it doesn't work. So we need to find the balance, whether it's maybe Naz kicks it out to Wilkie, runs past, gets the handball. We need him to break the lines rather than just be standing and doing a stationary kick out of the back 50, because it's not working and it hasn't worked all season. And we're doing the same thing over and over again. It's just like hitting our head against a wall. And watching it, I feel like hitting my head against a wall as well. So I can't imagine what it's like for the players out on the field having the same thing happen. We just need a change in whether it's the players who are leading for the ball, how we're getting the ball out of the 50. Something has to change with our ball movement.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's not the way the first kick's done, it's the follow-up. Last year, it was either Naz or Sinks, it was Brad Hill. They were kicking on that 45 to get it maybe 35, 40 out from the defense goal. But then they were running on, they were getting a handball receive, and then they were crossing the direction, going the opposite way, and it really created space. At the moment, I reckon we're lucky to do that once a quarter. Yeah. And with how much our defense is, sort of balancing everything at the moment, like I feel like that should be nearly the opposite in terms of maybe 80% of the time is we're kicking it and then we're running off and getting a handball receive, and then we're finding a Membry, finding a Marshall, and then the ball movement just comes a whole lot better. It's just very stagnant at the moment, and I couldn't agree more with you there. Pete, who's under the microscope for you?
So for me, I'm going to put the microscope on Mitch Owens. This is a team now. We've got 3 genuine full forwards in there with members King and Caminiti. So if Mitch wants to go and be a midfielder, cool, man. I've said I think he ends up playing more forward than mid, but if he's dead set on being a midfielder, awesome. Go be a midfielder this week. Go Harley Reid against Harley Reid, right? Like go do to Harley Reid what Harley Reid does to teams. Go bully him. Go kick some goals from 50 metres because you can do it. You want to be a midfielder? This is your chance. Go show us you can be a midfielder.
I love it. I don't think that decision's on him at the moment. I think, and it sort of goes back to who I'm going to put under the microscope a little bit as well. But I've said it for weeks. I'll keep saying it. He should be in the midfield even if it's for 15 minutes a quarter. Just get him in there, show some grunts, show some strength, get some, bull mentality through the rest of the guys, rather than all of them just being lackadaisical and being completely blown out by the opposition mids. But I like it. I like where you're thinking. I just don't think Mitch has got too much of an opinion, unfortunately, because I wish he did.
I think,
Evan,
just to clarify,
sorry,
just to clarify, it's not necessarily about going and getting 30 touches in the midfield.
Yeah, correct.
He doesn't need to play deep, and he doesn't need to play in a position where he's not going to get the ball. But if he wants to be the alpha male, this is your chance to push up the ground and go be the alpha male.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely agree. Evan, under the microscope for you?
Yeah, I'll go Seb Ross for that one there, another midfielder. Quickly on Mitchie, I do wish he had that 15 minutes each round in the midfield, so he had a bit of practice, maybe even just for the last 3 weeks. Then going into this one, he's got a little bit of experience. Because what a watch that would be, seeing Machito and Harley Reid going at it, just both fending off and tackling each other at the same time. You'd pay just to see that. But at least for now, Seb Ross, when you're losing the hitouts like we were last round, you either want to see that he's smashing the tackles or he's managing to get a clearance out of there, and he just did neither. As you said, had some time on the wing. That's not him. So he needs to find some area to take control, and either hoping to see 6-7 good clean clearances from him, or at least doing the team defense job and putting some pressure on, because at the moment we're seeing nothing.
Absolutely agree. I like all the opinions there. Just going to throw to some of the guys from home. A lot of talk about battle, as we mentioned, which is good. Kenny reckons battle situation is a win-win. I like the outlook there. For Chris, under the microscope, Mason Wood, I like it. I think he's been good without being the Mason Wood that we probably expect from his defensive efforts, but also going up forward. And even just, he had the ability last year just to snag a goal or two when we really needed it. So I'd love to see him to return to some form as well. Back on our sort of kick-out issues, we're just playing lazy football. That's what's changing with our kick-outs. Could not agree more. For me this week, I always like to attack someone else other than the players, because I feel like at the moment there's a lot of coaching issues, especially our midfield. So my under the microscope is on former player Brendan Goddard. I think he took over a midfield that was quite good last year. I think without being damaging, I thought we were quite solid without taking the world by storm. But at the moment, everything just looks absolutely non-existent. And I feel like he might have had an opinion on Brad Crouch not coming in as well, which, again, raises more concerns regarding that. But I think there'll be, at the end of the year, coaching change. I think Robert Harvey might get moved on or changed in his line. He's the forward coach at the moment. But I thought last year, again, the balance was really, really simple, really easy, really fluent, and we've just lost that spark at the moment. So it's on BJ to get us back, get that spark in the middle, whether it's, Rowe getting the hit outs or Steely just taking the team on his shoulders and really providing that spark. Someone's got to get there and in there and really start damaging the scoreboard for us. And I think key is the early start from this weekend. No waiting 2 or 3, and a half quarters to, try and come back. We've done that too many times early in the year. Let's start fast. They got blown out of the water last week against the Crows. It was 50-1 at one stage. Let's do the same thing again. Best way to beat the West Coast Eagles over there in front of their home crowd is to shut down the crowd noise from the start. So that's my under the microscope. Again, thanks for everyone at home commenting your thoughts. Before we wrap up, I don't like asking this question because each time I've asked it, it's not going well. So let's hope fortunes can change a little bit. But what do we think, guys? This weekend, tough game. We shouldn't have said that 6 months ago, but with the form as it is at the moment, it's going to be a tough ask. Can we get the 4 points over there? And what's the scoreline going to be?
It's not going to be a high-scoring one, hopefully. Yeah. I'd say. Sorry, you go, mate.
After this, surely we have to win. Like, it's hard to predict, and it's hard to put your optimism hat on with the first quarter and what happened last week. Again, we come up against a team that got smacked and embarrassed, and they're going to want to respond. And so you know that from the first bounce, they're going to have watched what happened to us last week, and they're going to be on, and they're going to know that we're gettable. Surely we win this, though. I'll take 1 point if that's all it is. Just win.
It's funny you ask that because I think the second quarter last week we brought it back to our sort of brand. I thought we were a lot better, a lot more competitive. Maybe didn't have the scoreboard pressure that we probably deserved, but going to halftime, we were 2 goals down, and there was a few misses. I think Caminiti missed one, that were like, look, you had to get that. It's a massive momentum killer. So I like your thinking, but I don't think it was I think the second half was a lot worse last week than the first half. But again, if we can start strong, then as I said, I'll take a 1 point victory any day of the week. Ollie, what do you think? You know, tough matchup at Eagles over in Perth. Can we get the 4s?
Well, I'd like to think we would walk away with the 4 points. We've seen to get teams the week after getting battered. Like it happened with the Bulldogs, it happened with Melbourne and our West Coast. So I'm hoping we can bounce back a little bit. Maybe, look, I'm thinking between 3 and 5 goals. Hopefully, that's optimistic. So I'd just like to see him bounce back and have at least a 3-quarter performance.
Do you think, just on that quickly, regarding this week's game, if they are able to get a win, and not like a 70-point win, but even just a 35, 25-point win where the form's a little bit better, West Coast kick a few late, blah, 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 can that change the tide heading into next week? Or did we try that with North Melbourne and it didn't work?
Yeah, we need a steadier, like just a good, well thought out, controlled game that we win, and hopefully that brings better form in the future. Hopefully that's the case.
Just before I jump to you, Evan, Wooden Spoon, actually do think we get up this week. Love the optimism. Few comments saying that we may lose. I don't want to bring them up. And one here from Craig, West Coast will give St Kilda another football lesson. Let's hope not. Evan, what are your thoughts this week?
Yeah, I think I'm looking for something different than just the North Melbourne win, because that felt like the steadier, but you didn't see things click. You didn't really see the full progress of that Saints footy. That looks like what we're trying to do. I feel like we won based on a couple of individual performances, Rowe doing what Rowe does. If we go into this game and from first bounce, we are much faster through the middle, we're actually getting some forward connection. Max King is getting the ball given to him the way that he sort of deserves there. And our defense actually gets some bounce back. That's more important than just the 4 points, is actually seeing us play the way that we're meant to be playing.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. C-Mac, the last comment here, a win would restore confidence, desperately needed. Much like we've all mentioned. So, look, I think we can get the chocolates, but as we've all said, it sort of starts from the first bounce. We need that intensity from the start. If it's not there, then it may be just a long afternoon. For those that are going, hopefully it's not too long for me, because don't plan on sitting in front of Eagles fans in a hostile environment. So that's all from us tonight, guys. Thank you, Evan, Ollie, and Pete for joining me again this evening. It's always good chatting Saints footy. Thanks for those that have watched at home and made their comments. Do love your support and your interactions as well. And as always, go the mighty Saints.
Go Saints.
Go Saints.
Thanks, guys. Go Saints.